What happened today in America?
Oh, that sounds like gunshot.
More than a protest, that's for sure. An occupation, a takeover, call it an insurrection, maybe all of the above. Honestly, I don't care what you call it, but we must call it out for what it is and call out the leaders who fan the flames.
And we're going to have to fight much harder.
Including those in Oregon.
If you're the enemy of the people, I am your enemy.
And tonight, we'll do just that. Here's the story. So, I don't know, how do we begin talking about what we witnessed today in America? Maybe the best way to do it is to make it less personal. You know, imagine this is something that happened in another country. Imagine it that way. Can you imagine if people stormed the Capitol building in the Middle East or in Eastern Europe? If IEDs were found at a political party headquarters in Russia, maybe, or in Ukraine, or if a woman was shot in the chest and killed on the Capitol grounds in London or in Paris, how would we talk about it? How would we discuss it here? It's kind of weird talking about it that way, though, isn't it? Because it didn't happen there. It happened here. All of those things, everything I just said, that all happened in these United States of America, at our seat of government, inside our Capitol building. So how do we talk about it? Well, I'll let you know how we plan to talk about it here, how I plan to talk about it on this story, and that's by calling it exactly what it is: insurrection, an assault on our democracy, and if allowed to continue unchallenged, an attempted coup. And look, I don't want to see another email from people comparing this to the political violence and riots that we've seen in Portland. Both are extremism, I get that, but those are not this. This is its own thing. This was a violent mob hell-bent on stopping our democratic process and unseating our newly and legally elected president, inspired by baseless allegations from the outgoing president that have been disproved, by the way, and investigated by multiple bipartisan agencies and courts, Republicans and Democrats. And now some of the president's closest allies have dropped the politics and admitted as much, okay? It's time that we all wake up. That said, if you live here in the Northwest, these pictures from Washington, D.C. probably feel like a continued nightmare. We see hordes of people surrounding the Capitol, smashing windows, breaking down doors, even making their way inside. And it seems familiar, doesn't it? Specifically familiar. It's because we have seen it in our own backyard only weeks ago. This was late December when rioters smashed their way into the Oregon Capitol building. A little more than a week before that, in Olympia, there was a shooting outside of the Capitol there during a clash of demonstrators. And now, today, it all culminated in this violent takeover of the U.S. Capitol by pro-Trump rioters who I assume think they're being patriots. You know, after all, President Trump continues to say that this election is rigged, that it's being stolen from him and the millions of Americans who voted for him, without a stitch of tangible evidence. After more than 60 failed lawsuits in federal court and multiple recounts in contested states. But some people don't care about that. They don't. A woman got killed today during this. So how do we talk about this tonight? Let's give it a shot. Kyle Iboshi starts us off.
Members of Oregon's congressional delegation were rushed to safety, along with colleagues, some wearing gas masks, after supporters of President Trump stormed the Capitol building.
It's a strange feeling to be locked in a room that you know is not really designed to be secure when there are angry people outside.
We spoke with Senator Jeff Merkley during a hastily arranged phone call. He and others evacuated to an undisclosed location.
We are safe. Senators were ushered to an undisclosed, secure location. So I can give you no information on that other than to say we're safe.
As the chaos unfolded, Senator Ron Wyden tweeted out a message that he too was safe, along with Representatives Suzanne Bonamici, Kurt Schrader, and Peter DeFazio. Congressman Earl Blumenauer blamed the president in a tweet saying, "The people storming the U.S. Capitol building right now are domestic terrorists, emboldened by Trump and every Republican who has spread lies about the results of the presidential election. This has to stop."
I can honestly tell you this is not how I planned on spending the third day of being a congressman. But
newly sworn-in Congressman Cliff Bentz condemned the attack on the Capitol building.
You cannot have a a government when you have that kind of thing happening.
Bentz, a Republican from Eastern Oregon, has called for an investigation into the 2020 presidential election.
I think the answer here is we need to show people that they are being heard and that the issues that they care so much about are being debated and thoughtfully considered so that folks that don't think they need to resort to this kind of thing.
Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler wrote, "The reports you're hearing about the chaos, panic, and dangerous actions by protesters are not exaggerations. I witnessed them." The Republican from Southwest Washington said she wouldn't vote to overturn the Electoral College results, adding, "We cannot be a nation of lawlessness and anarchy. That's the road we're headed down with this disrespect for our popular elections and our Constitution, and the never-ending conspiracy theories and misinformation." Despite the frustration and fear at the U.S. Capitol building, history was preserved. Senator Merkley shared this photo of the mahogany boxes holding Electoral College ballots rescued from the Senate floor. Kyle Iboshi, KGW News.
Now, versions of what we saw in D.C. also happened in state houses across America, including here in Oregon. A large pro-Trump group showed up at the steps of the Capitol in Salem. They were watching coverage from D.C. on a big screen. Now, I do want to be very clear that what we saw happen in Salem was nothing like what we saw in D.C. today. But one up in Olympia got a little bit closer. A group of pro-Trump extremists there managed to breach the grounds of the governor's mansion. Governor Inslee had to be moved to a secure location. Now, one of the attendees in Salem, in Oregon, was Republican State Senator Dallas Hurd of Roseburg, who you see there, who, while pro-Trump extremists laid siege to the U.S. Capitol, he thought it would be a good idea to say this.
Democrat or anyone, senator, representative, mayor, county commissioner, if you're the enemy of the people, I am your enemy.
So Senator Hurd did go on, I want to specify this, went on and told the crowd not to get violent. They did turn violent, by the way. And let's be clear, at a time when mobs are swarming state houses across America, including the U.S. Capitol, choose your words wisely. Riling the crowd, then telling them not to be violent seems a little counterintuitive, especially after you just finished calling your colleagues enemies of the people. Because as we've seen today and in the past, these words can quickly become actions, and these actions can quickly become violence. Maggie Vespa has more for us from Salem.
A burning effigy of Governor Kate Brown caught from Sky 8 around noon Wednesday. Wider shots from above show the size of this crowd at Oregon State Capitol. Video on the ground shows violence escalating Wednesday afternoon. Tear gas, smoke bombs, and punches flew between supporters of President Trump and counter-protesters. The core group here, ardent supporters of the president, who, like those in D.C., believe debunked conspiracy theories about the election being stolen from him. Also riling people up, speeches from current and former GOP state lawmakers who said this was an insurrection and told veterans to be ready.
What we're being accused of today is the same thing that our forefathers were being accused of when they signed their names to the Declaration of Independence. They pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. What are we willing to do?
Staffers for Oregon House Speaker Tina Kotek telling KGW the state capitol building was closed Wednesday in anticipation of this happening. A spokesman telling us no one was inside except law enforcement. The speaker sent this tweet Wednesday, but only referenced the D.C. riots. She called it, quote, an attempted coup and a disgraceful, tragic day for our country and our democracy.
Maggie Vespa reporting for us there. Now, as we kind of look back in time a little bit more, 2 days after that December attack on the Capitol in Salem, Senate President Peter Courtney and House Speaker Tina Kotek, they met with state police. And we haven't heard this detail before, but apparently the situation was even more alarming than we first suspected. I talked to Senator Courtney on the phone this afternoon, and here's what he told me that state police told him about that day.
And they said to us, they almost got into the Capitol, into the rotunda. Had they gotten in, we would have been outmanned, outgunned, and we would have been in a very serious situation because you individuals would have been on the inside, literally on the inside. And that was very sobering. I'd never had state troopers talk to me that way before in my life. The state police made it clear to us, given the design of our building and everything else, some of us would have been trapped, and we would have been in a very serious situation.
Now, there were a few people I wanted to hear from more today than our sitting members of Congress, these people who were forced to flee the Capitol for their safety when that mob burst through the doors. Our Catherine Cook managed to connect with Oregon Democrat Kurt Schrader.
I mean, what went through your mind when you realized truly the gravity of what was happening?
Well, a little disbelief, to be honest. I mean, this is the party of law and order. They were concerned about the Portland protests, you know, give them some credit there. You know, that turned violent also and unfortunately obscured a very legitimate BLM concern. And much the same happened here. It's so interesting. They're two sides of the same coin. They don't see that. You know, the far left or far right that just don't understand the democratic process.
In your estimation, how did it get this far?
Donald J. Trump. This strikes me so much like my poor colleague from Arizona, Gabby Giffords, almost 10 years ago, when Rush Limbaugh and that ilk was whipping people up into a frenzy over what was going on, and people lost perspective. People began to believe some of the crazy rhetoric that was out there. Donald J. Trump did this too.
Another Oregon Congress member took a direct attack at President Trump today as well. Suzanne Bonamici tweeted a message saying it's time for President Trump to resign or be removed from office.
This is completely unacceptable that he has encouraged these acts of violence and this terrible, awful, terrifying takeover of the Capitol here today. I hope everyone who has broken the law here is held accountable. And we are going to go back later tonight and do our constitutional duty of certifying this election.
And she isn't alone either. A Minnesota Congresswoman, for instance, Ilhan Omar, she tweeted that she's actually writing up articles of impeachment right now. No word if that's actually going to happen. No president has been impeached twice, and his term does end in a matter of weeks. Now, there's a guy we like to talk to during moments like these, moments that defy words or modern precedent, and that's a political science professor, Dr. Jim Moore of Pacific University. Our Tim Gordon had a chance to sit down with him and had a question that I think we all have.
Put this in perspective for us, Jim. I mean, where does this fit in our politics and in our history?
Well, in terms of the violence being done around the Capitol right now, we haven't seen anything similar to this since the British came by in the War of 1812 and burned basically Washington, D.C. to the ground. I mean, that's how big this is. In terms of the protests, you know, even the huge protests we've seen in the past with Martin Luther King Jr., we saw the Million Man March. We've seen the Right to Life groups who show up every January. You know, they use the Capitol as a backdrop for their protests to say this is a national issue. We need to be in this symbolic place. The group today is not looking at symbolism. They're looking to actually occupy, destroy, and take over what's going on in the Capitol building and those symbols. That's exactly what we're seeing right now. And so it's just different in terms of tone, but it's different in terms of legal definitions and different in terms of the importance of what this means to our country.
And what's the significance of that?
Sure, the significance is that people have lost faith in the United States government to be something that is on their side, and they want to get rid of it or take it back in their own image. And lots of people have thought that before, but taking the actions is very different. You know, there's a striking parallel to some things I saw today. There was a picture today of a group using a police shield to break in a window and get inside the Capitol building. It's exactly what we saw in Salem a couple of weeks ago during the Oregon special session of people with a bat breaking in the door, trying to get in there for very, very much the same kinds of reasons. We need to take back our government. We need to be heard. We need to be part of the process, but using violence to do it. And that's what we're seeing today, is that kind of revolutionary fervor, insurrection. Those are the words to be using today.
So where do we go from here? What do you see?
Well, in the short term, you know, we'll get the protesters cleared out either of their own accord, or as we're talking, National Guard troops are getting together and all sorts of things. So who knows how that'll end up. Second short-term thing is Congress has to fulfill its duty and count the votes for the President of the United States. That's going to be fascinating because there were at least 12 senators, there were 100 to 140 members of the House. who were basically going to start objecting to at least 3 states and maybe more. I think that anything they say now along those lines is just going to make them look like idiots. I mean, that's a technical term, but they're going to look like idiots because what they were calling for in kind of an ethereal plane, a theoretical plane, has played out by chasing them from the chambers and having tear gas put off against rioters inside the Capitol building of the United States.
Now, as we know, the Capitol's been cleared. Lawmakers are back to work, and we are getting a different tone from some of those people who were kind of acting as if they were a part of this protest days ago. If you can tell, if you watch this show very often, you can tell I'm kind of working with some emotions today. Just like you, I'm sad, I'm angry, like a lot of you. These are probably feelings you're feeling as well. But I'm also sad and angry because of the opportunity that we lost today to do some of the other work we intended to do, which was to press the state of Oregon on our COVID response and our vaccine rollout. Yeah, those haven't gone anywhere, even during an insurrection. Hopefully, we're going to be able to get to all that tomorrow. We're going to still work on it. I promise. We're working on it right now because it is very important, because people are still dying every day because of this virus. Businesses are still closed. Kids are still waiting to go back to school. But instead of telling that story and pressing those politicians and those people who work for the state and work for that rollout, we had to deal with this today, and that's not fair. It's not fair to the people who are sick, to the doctors treating them, to the businesses struggling. It isn't fair. Here's hoping that tomorrow is a better day, and the shining beacon on the hill is again lit up, because tonight it sure looked pretty dim from where I'm standing. That's the end of the story. We'll see you tomorrow.